Welcome to Digital Hospitality. I am your host, Shawn Walchef, and this is a Cali BBQ production. Today is game day, November 7th. We're recording on November 7th, just before the Chargers take on the Raiders on Thursday Night Football. And we have a very special guest from the other side of the United States that has trekked his way all the way across, recording podcast. This guy has the #1 restaurant podcast that is available. He's been doing it for 4 years. He has published over 670 episodes. We recorded an episode yesterday. I believe I was guest number 675. And today we have Eric Cacciatore. Welcome to Digital Hospitality.
Thank you for having me here, man. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to dive into the story.
So out of the 670 restaurant owners, chefs, people that are stakeholders in restaurants, have you ever been invited to record in a restaurant's media / garage converted space?
No.
So this
that
is
the first time.
Okay,
that is the
good.
first time.
We like being firsts. So yeah, even though for those of you that listen to the show, even though we're located in East County, San Diego, about 15 miles from downtown San Diego from Gaslamp, obviously we're all in on digital. And one of the cool things about audio and learning is that you can learn something passively. So while I'm driving, I listen to podcasts all the time. I heard your podcast with Howard Solomon. Howard and Deborah, they were both on Digital Hospitality, and you did a phenomenal job learning about his background. And by learning about his background, I was able to learn about who they were. And that's really one of the coolest things that I've found about podcasting. Tell me why.
Why? What exactly?
Why did you start podcasting?
Why did I start? So I discovered podcasting way back in 2012. And after about 6 months of waiting for my podcast to be created, waiting for somebody to create the podcast, I was... Who was
going to create it?
Well, I didn't know. I mean, like...
It was in your head, but you...
you discover podcasting, the first thing isn't usually through your mind isn't like, I need to start my own podcast right now. Like you get hooked on them, and then you're like, oh, like this is great. And then you're like, where's this one podcast that I'm looking for? Why doesn't it exist? Will somebody hurry up already and like think of this? And then it's just like, well, why don't I just do it? That was kind of like the how it came to surface is, there was just so many people out there sharing knowledge. So, I mean, the big story, I can give you the full story if you want me to.
The full story.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm so used to giving the abbreviated story.
Well, long form podcasting. Yeah. We want to know the real shit.
The real story, is that I resigned from aviation. I was a commercial pilot, went back to school for marketing and hospitality. And when I was in school, in my classes for marketing and hospitality, one of my first classes with a particular instructor, David Mazer, it was a sales class. He walked into the classroom and he says, "Who here listens to podcasts?" And not a single person. I can curse on this word.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the first day of class, he walks into night class. He walks in. The first thing he says to the class is, "Who here listens to podcasts?" Nobody raised their hand. He walked out of the classroom, and I don't know.
I like him already.
Yeah, you this is 2012. So night class, in the school. Doors, classroom doors will have they're a wooden door usually, and there's a little glass slit with the metal frame that you can see him through that little crack window, right? And he looks left, he looks right, and he screams, "You've got to be fucking kidding me!"
Fantastic.
And then he comes back in. He was making his point, right? He comes back in and he's like, "You have such an incredible opportunity at your fingertips. There literally anything you want to learn is a click away. Your homework assignment is to go home and to listen to." Or to research 3 topics of your choice, and then come back and find one podcast under each topic, and then present it to the classroom. And the 3 topics I looked into were hospitality, marketing, and entrepreneurism. And nothing for hospitality at all. All the marketing and entrepreneurial podcasts you could think of, but nothing for hospitality. So anyway, that was kind of my first hint right there, is that the hospitality industry hadn't quite caught up yet. But that's kind of the story. The hospitality industry is always if you look at that bell curve, right? They're always at the trailing edge of the bell curve. They're we're late adopters in this industry typically. So it made sense that nobody was doing a solid restaurant podcast in 2012. So, and that's kind of
So it was in that class that the birth of well, fuck, I need to do a podcast then.
Yeah. Well, basically so we started listening to all these podcasts, right? Of people, entrepreneurs, marketers, people in the tech industries, just pouring their souls out, pouring their hearts out, sharing all their knowledge, sharing their life stories, and like saying like, this is literally exactly how I did it. This is what you need to know. Like, here are the special skills you need. And it blew my mind that in the second largest industry behind healthcare, the rest of the hospitality industry, we're not sharing knowledge like this. Massive industry, employs so many people. Why aren't we this generous with our knowledge? Why aren't we supporting each other like these other tech industries are supporting each other? Like that's really what I wanted to do, is I wanted to recreate what had already been created for other industries, but for the restaurant industry. And I believe that, well, my dream was always to open a restaurant, right? But
oh, really?
I mean, I can go even further back.
Oh, yeah. No, I want to know. I want to know, because
So, yeah.
hospitality is in people's blood, and whether you're doing it on the media side or whether you actually do it for a living or whether you want to do it, like that's important.
Yeah. So
people are compelled to this cause.
So my parents opened a restaurant, and I grew up in the industry. So that's kind of how I got into the restaurant industry. They had it from a time I was 3 to 13 is when they owned the restaurant. It was a solid 10-year run. We were very busy. But I think my parents, a combination of bad luck, we were going to relocate up the street onto like a really busy intersection. And the woman that owned that property, who had a restaurant there for like 40 years before we were going to purchase it from her, passed away the morning that we were going to sign papers to relocate our restaurant. So when you're living paycheck to paycheck, when you're just getting by as a small business owner, you can't take 3 weeks to find a new space. Like you need cash flow to come in. So that was kind of like the nail in the coffin. My mom she had been done for years. That wasn't her vision. It wasn't her dream. It was my dad's thing. So after that experience, they're like, all right, we're done. But I continued to have the passion for the industry, and I continued to dream and, want to open my own place sometime, continue to work in restaurants while I went to school to become a commercial pilot, and then continue to work in restaurants after I graduated to, supplement my income, because pilots don't make a ton of money getting started, $20,000, $25,000 a year.
And what happened with the pilot career?
So basically, I just decided that it wasn't for me. After 8 years of my life, hustling and working hard, I just realized that, this isn't my path. This isn't the lane I'm supposed to be on. More or less, none of my natural strengths shone through as a commercial pilot. I consider myself to be.
Who did you fly for?
I flew for Commute Air.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a United Express. We operate under United Express.
So how many passengers?
15 passenger turboprop.
How many?
Dash 8. 50 passenger.
50 passenger. Yeah. Okay. It's a lot of people you're responsible for.
Yeah. It was only there for like 4 years or 4 months. I kind of told myself that if it doesn't get better, like if I don't enjoy it more, if like the clouds don't part and the rays don't shine through, and if I don't hear angels singing, like when I get to this level, then like I'm not going to continue with it. I kind of knew early on that it wasn't like that. I didn't love it, but I was afraid to quit. Which I think is a really important lesson, that it's okay to quit sometimes. Like you want to ride it out. You want to be successful. But if everything inside you is saying like, this doesn't feel right, it's okay to be a quitter if you're spending $200,000 on your career, you know, like you don't want to come out the other end in that kind of debt. So like that's just one example where it's okay to quit if it doesn't feel right. So I wish I had.
So when you did quit, what compelled you to get into that hospitality class?
Well, I mean, basically it was all, I found myself looking forward to my part-time jobs. Like after, working my full-time jobs, my part-time jobs were in the hospitality industry. And I found myself looking forward to it. Like I can't wait for the weekend so I can go hang out with the people I enjoy to be around and do the work I love to do. So that was a sign. And I was making just about as much money in hospitality as I was as a commercial pilot at this time, because it takes a lot of time to get to the point where you make decent money as a pilot. So I was like, it's a lateral move. Yeah, I see that there's a long-term investment, but I'd rather be poor and happy than poor and miserable, you know? So that was kind of the reason why I wanted to get into hospitality. But at the same time, I knew that I couldn't work in the industry because I was over $200,000 in debt from becoming a commercial pilot. So
a lot of debt.
Yeah, so I'm not going to pay that back serving table. I mean, I could, but it would take me a really long time.
Sure.
So I thought if I can't work in restaurants, I at least want to work with restaurant people, because that's what I really love about this industry is the people that are in it. The most authentic, genuine, take me as I am, I got your back, fun people, like people, we're a good time.
Yeah.
Like, we are a good time in this industry, and I love the camaraderie of this industry. And that's what draws me to it. And plus, I love serving other people. I like making people happy. And the cookie for me has always been a smile on somebody's face. You know, like, that's the reward, that's the treat. It's like being like approved of. You know, I think we all secretly want to be approved of deep down inside. So like, that was the draw for me. But I lost the train of thought. What was the original? So
the draw is what compelled you to take that hospitality class, but then it was the teacher that, you know, sparked the idea.
Well, originally I went back to school for marketing, but then I was convinced to also take classes in hospitality because they're like, this is clearly what your passion is. Like, they could tell that.
So did you want to become a manager, or you just wanted the extra education? You just knew that education would lead you somewhere else.
Honestly, the truth is that it was cheaper to go back to school part-time, defer my school loans, than it was to pay off my school loans. There you go. Yeah. That was the real reason why I went back to school. So I could go back part-time. I think like 6 credits is all you need to defer your school loans. And at a community college, 6 credits a semester isn't a lot of money. It's like $1,000, maybe $2,000 a semester. Not bad. It's manageable. It's a lot more manageable than $1,000, $1,100 a month, which is what I was paying. So that was the big reason why I went back.
And then when you went back, what your teacher inspires you? He puts the idea in your head. And, you know, yesterday when we were talking, you were asking me, you know, mantras that I live by, and things that have always resonated with me is to stay curious. It's something that my grandfather taught me, but it's not just the staying curious, it's getting involved. So a lot of people hear a good idea or know that, hey, maybe that's something I've always wanted to do, but they don't take that next step, like that action step where you actually make a logo. You come up with the name of your podcast.
Well, I think that's the power of podcasting, right? The only reason why I was able to guster up the will to do that, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the bravery, but you know what I mean? Like
sure. I mean, the inspiration.
Yeah. Like, it was because I was listening.
You can't just hear it. It's something else has to happen.
Yeah. The gusto, whatever word, you know, like the reason why I was able to take that jump off the cliff was because I was surrounding myself with literally hundreds of people, in a year, of people who've done it. You know, I must have listened to so many hours worth of podcasts of people sharing how they
Anyone
exactly
in particular?
How they did it. The podcast I listened to were Entrepreneur on Fire was probably one of the first ones I got hooked on.
John Lee Dumas.
He was at like episode 30 when I started listening. So this is like
he's like thousands.
Yeah. So like, it was just when he was getting started. Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income.
Pat Flynn, San Diego podcaster.
Yep.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Yep. So he was a big influence on me. At that time I was listening to Michael Hyatt, which was a little too spiritual for me, to be honest, but it was good content. It was good advice. And I think the other big one at that time was the Kick-Ass Life podcast, Michael T. Wood. Okay. And then now some of the newer podcasts I started listening to, what I was listening to like somewhat back then too, is The Art of Charm, which is a really great one, which is now the Jordan Harbinger show. He went off and did his own show now. And the School of Greatness are probably the ones that I was listening to. So that's just those lineups, those people that are getting on this show are just totally inspirational, totally motivational. So when you hear that you hear the lows of the lows that these people went to, you know, like sleeping on couches or being homeless and like literally having nothing, to like becoming successful, not overnight, but like they pulled it off eventually, but with hard work and just showing up. Like that motivates you. That gives you the encouragement. That was the word I was looking for, just to take the leap. And the number one piece of advice all the time was just start. Just start. It can be the shittiest thing you've ever done, but the next time you do it, it's going to be a little less shittier. Then it's going to be a little less shittier and a little. But once you start, you have something to compare it to, you know, and you can improve as you go.
Stop thinking and start failing.
And just do it.
The failure is what people are terrified of.
My mantra is ain't nothing to it but to do it. Like you just go, do it and just keep showing up.
And what was the first thing that you did to get your podcast launched?
The first thing I did? Well, you gotta, you know, there's all the things you have to do. Like you have to have a host, a media host like Libsyn. You have to have a website. Well, you don't have to actually. But
why do you have to wait before you go back? I know why you need to have a media host, but why should you have a media host?
It takes up a lot of data, like a lot of, it makes if you're hosting all that media on your website, it's going to slow your website down. Like, I'm sure there's other reasons, but that's the one that sticks out in my mind.
And it distributes, right?
Oh yeah, and plus that's where all the media players are pulling from.
Correct.
Yeah.
So multiple media players, essentially you're creating audio content and you want it to be in as many places as possible. Those services like Libsyn and Burberry, they do that for you at a low cost.
Yep.
So that you're on Apple iTunes, you're on Podcatcher, you're on Stitcher, all those. Correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. So that they all pull from Libsyn. Exactly.
Now, did you use their website or did you have your own?
I use my own.
Why did you do that?
Well, I mean, you want a home base. You want a place. I mean, the whole idea of having a podcast is to redirect people back to something that you own.
Yes.
So whether it's selling a product that you've created, or you're just building an email list, or you're building a community, or you're linking back to affiliate links or whatever, you want your own space, because it's like the whole, like, Facebook's huge today, right? But it could go away tomorrow. Same thing with TikTok, or look at Snapchat. Not as nearly as big of a deal as it was 3 years ago, right? So you want to invest in yourself and your own assets, because you can't depend on other assets.
Were you at all concerned that you don't have an IT background?
Yeah, honestly, I think my biggest Achilles heel is the technology side of things. Like, I'm not a technical person. That's one of the reasons why I got out of the aviation industry, because I'm not technical. Honestly, like, I think we talked about it during our recording. I'm dyslexic. I'm colorblind. I have horrible ADHD. I should have never became a commercial pilot, right?
You beat all odds.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing I made it as far as I did. And I'm an avid believer that you have to reveal your strengths. You have to lean into your strengths sometimes to also reveal you have to lean into your weaknesses and to reveal your strengths sometimes. And it was my strength of being sociable, caring for others, being socially, just emotionally intelligent, that allowed me to develop relationships. And I think I got pushed through the system. People wanted to see me become successful because they liked me and I was their friend. Like, they were going to make sure I got through, So like, that's what got me to the point of becoming a commercial pilot, flying 50 passengers around, because I was likable. So imagine what I could do if I put myself into a path where it pays even more to be likable, where like, it's all about caring for other people and being empathetic and serving, like, service to others. Like, that's the hospitality industry. That's sales. That's marketing. It's understanding people, So that's kind of what was going through my mind. So.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you sharing your vulnerabilities. That's one of the things that has always been consistent for me and my co-host before was, behind the smoke, how this whole podcast started before it became Digital Hospitality was exactly that. It's the failures that we all learn, that we know that it's not easy. None of this stuff is easy. And for me, yesterday you shared your dyslexia, and that was very powerful. And I told you need to share that more, because I'm sure there's other people out there. When I went to my emails today, I got an email from Cal Fussman. Cal Fussman started his podcast because of Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss had him on. He used to write for Esquire. The guy's interviewed the most famous people in the world and just does a phenomenal job. Incredible storyteller. He just had Charles Schwab on his podcast, and Charles Schwab talked about his dyslexia.
Well, the truth, like, it's amazing how many successful people out there are dyslexic, and we don't do well in traditional settings, school settings, where there's standardized testing, things of this nature. But I think that I honestly don't have numbers to back this up, but I wouldn't be surprised if people who have dyslexia are more or score higher than average in other verticals like emotional and social intelligence. But those things aren't really that important. I mean, they're great with, having friends in high school and elementary school is important, and that's a good thing to have, but you don't get graded on that. So like, all these things, they emerge later on in life. Like, you might not be able to do the thing, but the person who can do the thing, and they like you. You know what I'm saying? Because you're socially intelligent, and you can read people, and you just understand how to make other people happy. And when you can serve other people, like, you create this community around you, and it always comes back around some way, somehow.
So, I'm sorry for my ignorance on dyslexia, but were you diagnosed? Was this early on that you?
Yeah. So I think they knew when I was young. Like I was always
Like
slow
your
to
parents or your teachers?
schools. Like
Schools.
something's not right with this one,
Yeah.
Like he should have figured this out.
Well, you don't
by
fit
now.
in the normal box, but that does, I mean, would
So basically, I mean, like little things like color blindness, like I would color like the lake purple, like what's wrong with that? Looks good to me,
Did you think
like,
it was blue?
Yeah. So like I just like shades and stuff like that would just like I just wouldn't be able to tell the difference between different colors.
And then dyslexia, you weren't able to read
that's totally
the words.
different. Yeah. So I was just slow to learn how to. I mean, it took me a long time to learn my ABCs, how to read. I don't think it was until probably like middle school where I could like. Even in middle school, I'll get like anxiety. Even to this day, reading intros for my podcast, I get anxiety if somebody has a hard last name.
Sure.
And I just learned to like. I just tell people now. Like when I was a commercial pilot, like I fucking buried that shit because if anybody found out as a commercial pilot, like my career was over. I'm a liability. Like, and I was never one to let somebody tell me I couldn't do something, which is why I just continued to go for it and try it. But anyway, I'm getting on a sidetrack. But I think the original question was technology. Right?
Well, I mean, I'm curious about it because, like I said, I really appreciate you sharing something that's so personal and so because that's the power of the podcast is that somebody listening, they might have that. And you are one of the 1% of new media podcasters that actually earns a living podcasting. I mean, we're going to put a link in the show notes about this article. This guy did an incredible job breaking down the statistics of podcasting, but there's over 500,000 podcasts and 1% of those podcasters are actually earning income from the podcast.
Yeah.
So you've created a business for yourself. You're doing what all these people aspire to do, and you're doing it despite your dyslexia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm leaning into my strengths. When we think of an audio podcast, I don't need to, like, I have a direct channel from like my heart to like my mouth, like I can just talk and I feel like I'm really good at communicating and connecting with other people. All you got to do is plug in the mic and hit record and just be human, and that's where I excel. So for me, it was a natural transition. It felt right. So, I mean, that helped. And like I was leaning into my strengths. There is that element of the show notes page and having to like publish things. But the truth is like with a show notes page is meant to be short and sweet. It's not meant to be, I mean, you can put the, what's it called when the word for,
so what just for those that don't know, why does a podcaster include show notes into an episode?
Well, you want to call to action. You want to redirect people back to your website, and you want to summarize the conversation. So if you mention a book or a tool or a service, you can link to it, and if they have an affiliate program, then you can earn cash that way. But the other thing is you want people, maybe they don't want to commit to the episode right away. So if you summarize what you discuss in the episode, maybe that might be a reason for them to hit play so they can get an abbreviated version of it. Right. Am I missing anything? Is there something that you want me to?
No, that's, I'm just trying to lay out so people understand the many moving parts that we've had to learn along the way.
But it's minimal though. It's not a lot of work. Correct. It's a one paragraph intro and then it's like a bullet points of the conversation. So it's not like, I mean, I would have horrible grammar and people would call me out for it all the time. But then at this point,
who's called you out before?
Just like listeners, like that, not in like a negative way. Like, hey man, like, just so you know, like I caught this typo. Like, I love the show, but
they send it as an email or they send it on
They'll
Twitter.
send me an email or like a tweet or I've had.
Like just grammatically or fixing somebody's like actual
grammatically,
knowledge.
Grammatic, or just like little stuff like that, or just I just don't pick up. I'm like the thing, like I don't pick up on little details. You know what I mean? Because I just the way I see it, it's just a blob. And like what might be glaring obvious to you, and like your first gut instinct is gonna be like, this mofo doesn't care. Like he just is throwing shit out there. Like does he not care about his work? And that's like the biggest fear is like, are people going to misinterpret my dyslexia for not giving a fuck? Because like that's the complete opposite of who I am. So like that was probably the biggest fear, the biggest hurdle I had to get over. But when you're transparent and you just let people know and they're like, oh, well that makes sense. And I think people are starting to come around too and be far more open-minded and realizing there's different forms of intelligence and that not everybody fits into the standardized box. But yeah, so
well, I mean, it's an incredible testament for you to be in new media, publishing digitally with something that you've been dealing with your whole life. And, you know, it says a lot that you had the courage to do that, and that you even have the courage to talk about it. So I do appreciate you digging
relieving.
into it.
It's relieving, you know?
And I told you yesterday, and I'll tell you today, I think you should lead with it. I don't think it's something, it's part of your story. It's who you are. And more people will be drawn to you because you're willing to share that, whether they have it or not.
Yeah.
Because maybe they don't. When was the first sponsorship pitch? When did you say, hey, this isn't just my side gig, maybe I can actually make money?
Yeah. That's a great question. I want to answer it, but I think I left something out that I think is really important that your listeners might like to hear. The thing that really was like the thing that really pushed me off the edge of the cliff to take the jump was that there's this quote, and it's funny because I reference it all the time, but I can never say it verbatim. But the gist is, if you make your life about helping other people achieve what they want in life, and if you can help them get what they want in life, then you can get anything you want in life. And that was kind of where I was at when I decided to start my podcast. Like, the dream was to open a restaurant. I wasn't in the position to do it because of the debt that I was in. But if I made my life about helping, or about learning the industry and sharing what I was learning with everybody else in the industry, and making my life about serving other people, and making it possible for them to achieve their dreams and their goals, then I knew somehow, some way, like, my dreams would come true. So that's where I started. I started focusing on other people and helping other people, and that taking the attention off of me and making it about everybody else is what gave me the courage and like the kick in the ass I needed. So it's just it was powerful for me, and I thought maybe your listeners would like to hear that.
Restaurant Unstoppable was the name you chose, right?
Yeah.
And why did you choose that name?
Honestly, I just felt like it was bold, you know, like the whole idea is like how to become unstoppable, like how to make your dreams, like your restaurant dreams, unstoppable. And I don't know, it just sounded solid. I wish there was a better origin story of the name. I remember I was in the winery. So I was an assistant winemaker while I was learning and listening about all these podcasts, because I was learning about wine to become a wine sales rep, basically. And that was kind of going to be my angle. But anyway, like, I was in the cellar one day and it just hit me while I was listening to a podcast, and I ran outside and I called my professor, the same one that told
really?
me. Yeah. And
Awesome.
I was like, it's going to be Restaurant Unstoppable.
So you kept in touch with him?
Yeah, it was to this day.
So were you still in the class when you called him to tell him that?
Yeah, it was probably within 6 months of when he first told me. So probably from
so you
the
called
time
him
I
and said,
discovered,
I'm launching the podcast. It's going to be called Restaurant Unstoppable.
Yeah.
What did he tell you?
I can only remember.
You don't remember? You were too fired up?
Yeah, I know I was too fired up, but I just felt right. Just the idea of like not stopping. I mean, and I think it resonated with the idea that I believe that you can like out hustle people in this industry. A lot of it is just having that the stamina to show up.
I want to talk about stamina, because I think one of the things, especially now as podcasts have become more popular and people like me are screaming and telling people, hey, you should start a podcast. Like, it's great to say you should start a podcast, to be curious about starting it, but talk about, to be a successful podcaster and to have stamina, what has to happen? I mean, what
you
is
need to
like,
love it, man. I think that's the big thing.
You can't get into it for an immediate return on investment. So
No.
this ROI, I'm going to do it for my marketing efforts.
Yeah.
That's not why why successful podcasters are making money.
No, well, I mean, you mentioned earlier I'm in the 1%, whatever the statistic is, but you have to keep in mind that, like, I started this thing 7 years ago, and I've published 2 to 3 episodes a week
7 years ago
for almost 7 years. Yeah,
that's incredible.
Going into my 7th year, 2013 was
7 years of podcasting.
So 6 full years going into the 7th year.
And I don't know if I shared with you, but Greg Rempe, who does Barbecue Central show, that fucking guy's been doing it for 12 years.
Oh yeah.
So between you and Rempe, you guys are like the veterans of the fucking podcast
But
world.
at that time, you know, I recognized, don't get me wrong, like, I recognized that nobody was doing this, and that there's a really big industry out there that doesn't have a solution for a podcast.
We're talking about internet real estate that has no stake to it.
Exactly.
You go into a category and there's no fucking,
like,
there's nobody there.
Flag. Yeah, exactly. So, like, I saw that as an opportunity, and then I only recognize that as an opportunity because all of these successful these successful entrepreneurs are just dumping their heart out, sharing their knowledge, and they say, you know, if you're looking for something and you can't find it, that's a clue, because you're not the only person looking for it. If you can be the only one doing it, that's another reason to get into it, because you're the first one there. And like, there's the difference between being number 1 and number 2 is something it's an absurd number. They talk about it in The Dip, but who wrote The Dip? Seth Godin wrote this book called The Dip, and he talks about like the difference between like vanilla and chocolate. Vanilla being like the number one most popular ice cream, and chocolate, it's like like there's almost twice as much vanilla ice cream sold. Like that difference between number one and number two in most things in life is like a staggering difference. So if you can become number one, then if you have, you can be like the one, if you can, like there's riches and niches, I think was like the saying that kind of like reeled me in at the time. But you were asking me another question. I digress.
Well, no, I was talking about stamina because I think
stamina,
like
right.
people need to understand that podcast. So you call your professor and you say, this is the name. How long from that till you publish your first episode did it take?
Probably from the time I decided that I was going to do a podcast, I actually built the knowledge base and the just
how much investment did you make?
Not a lot. I mean, how much does it cost to have a website? Like a couple of dollars a month, you know, the initial investment and a couple of dollars. I don't even think how much is the initial investment? It's not that much.
I mean, you can get website. It just depends on what you're trying to do.
And the mic I was using was, a Blue Yeti or something like that, or like something stupid. It was like $50 and it plugged straight into my computer, and I was using GarageBand to do my editing. So the biggest expense at the time was basically media host, which was like $12 a month, and then like your website. But what I didn't have was any idea how to build a website or do a blog. And like, that's what I was kind of, while working full time and going to school, learning on the side how to basically start a blog. And being somebody who's like technically like inefficient. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it was a slow learning curve for me to be honest. But I just kept learning every day, and by surround, they say, I think it's an overuse quote or saying, but you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Just listening to those podcasts over and over again just kept me focused. Yeah. On like, this is what you're trying to do. So it was that encouragement. And I was able to earn a full-time living while learning, because I was listening to these podcasts while I was at work every day in this cellar by myself, listening at podcasts at times 2. Yeah. You know, so that's, if you listen to 8 hours of podcast, that's 16 hours of learning from successful people a day. You're working the system, you know, like you can speed up time. You can learn even faster, you know? Yeah. So like having that just kept me focused.
And then how long did it take till you actually thought that this could be a business?
I knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. You asked me about sponsors. Yeah. That was the original question. I think it took me probably 3 years to get to the point where I could have sponsors. And even then I was totally like selling myself short. Yeah. Because I didn't quite recognize
How many episodes had you published once you started pitching sponsors?
Probably close to 100, over 100 at least. I was doing 50 a year. So
one a week?
I was probably around 150, close to 200 when I first started.
One a week?
I was actually, at one point I was doing 3 a week. For like a solid year and a half period, I was doing 3 a week.
3 a week?
Yeah.
Every single week?
Yeah. Consistently.
Jesus.
Recording, like lining up the guests,
That's
recording.
Insane.
I was sending out 10 emails a day, and like
cold emails just off the restaurant website.
1 out of every 10 email would get a response.
That's surprising.
The pendulum has swung, you know. But this is like restaurant owners back in 2012, like, hey, I have a podcast. I'm like, what?
What the fuck are you talking about?
Leave me alone.
I would argue that restaurant owners might say that today in 2019. Yeah,
exactly. But imagine how bad it was 10
I could only imagine. I mean, we had podcasters that would pitch me, and of course, I'm all in for anybody doing anything like that.
Yeah. But so many people, plus I was going after him. I think one of the first people I reached out to was like Danny Meyer. You know, like, oh, like this guy seems successful. I'll get him on the show. Like, you know, just had no idea.
So when you were setting these up, you were doing, people could call into the show over Skype? Were you recording, or were you doing face-to-face?
Actually, the first interview I did was face-to-face. And then every interview after that until 2 years ago, well, until like 3 years ago, was I started doing face-to-face. So for me, do you want me to get into why I was doing the face-to-face?
Absolutely.
In the restaurant industry, working with trying to book restaurant owners and operators are usually very like technology, like they're just not great with technology. So getting them to like download Zoom or Skype on their phone and then to like jump through all these hoops just to be a guest on the show was stressful. Then if they were able to get on the show and if they did agree with it and they did jump through all the hoops of schedule, like use the scheduling app, then download this software and then meet me on this day and make sure you have Wi-Fi and make sure you have a headset and like all these things. It was just easier for me just to say,
I'll come to your restaurant
use
when
this
you're
link
closed.
to tell me when, where, and like, you know, and like, I'll come to you.
Yeah.
You know, plus the audio quality in these restaurants was crappy. Like the service is always cutting in and out. And it was extremely frustrating. You're wasting this person's time at that point. When you have shitty audio quality and you're cutting in and out of service and the Wi-Fi is garbage and there's people in the background and like you can't even hear what they're saying.
They want to talk to them. Yeah.
So I knew that if I was going to do this right with good quality, that I would have to be on site. You mean, you see all these tech podcasts where it's a CEO interviewing a CEO and they both have tech companies.
Yeah.
Like that person's going to be hardwired in, you know, they're going to have their own like microphone and they're probably going to be technically inclined.
Yeah.
So like that was just a hurdle that I didn't see that I would have to get over to start a podcast for this industry, which is probably another reason why there wasn't any good restaurant podcasts at the time.
Sure. I want to talk about yesterday. We touched about you feeling like you were an imposter.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I was talking to my producer Stover, who's in Oregon, but he's a journalist by trade. And part of being a journalist and part of new media is approaching what old media has to do. And that's go in not knowing anything and asking for information, right? Being vulnerable and literally going and saying, you know, hey, will you give me your time?
Yeah. Well, I think what got me over my imposter syndrome, what helped me like clear that hurdle was that, you know, I just leaned on transparency. I wasn't pretending to be the restaurant expert. I just said, well, here's my avatar. Like this is who I am. I'm a student of the industry. Truth. I was literally in school as a marketing and hospitality student.
Are you still a student?
I'm always going to be a student.
Correct.
And technically I haven't gotten those degrees yet because I dropped out. So yeah, I'm still a student. I'm just waiting to get back in there.
No, we're all students. I mean, my grandfather was studying until he was 80. He passed away when he was 88. He never stopped learning.
Yeah, you need to have that mentality. Like you will not. You've got to continue to learn. You've got to continue to grow. So yeah, I'm a life student for sure. But I said that to when I was reaching out to people. Hey, like my name's Eric Cacciatore. I'm the host of this podcast. My mission with this podcast is to learn from the most successful people out there and to share what I'm learning with the rest of the world. And I think I would say like I'm a student who started this podcast, and it's, you know, I started to learn from the best. And I think by being transparent and using that word student, like, I think people are suckers for students.
I wouldn't say we're suckers. I think that the biggest goal that people have, I mean, if you gather information and we don't pass it on, then what good is that information that we
suckers for students. Like if somebody's here to learn from you, like if it's somebody like, hey, I want to exploit you and like
what better way can you help someone than to teach them?
Exactly. So like so being a student and being transparent and not pretending not to have all the answers, but just being like, I'm here to learn from you. And that's what I would say. Like consider yourself mentor, mentee, you know? And like, I just want to,
which is even better because people approach those relationships. Well, hey, let's get coffee or let's go get lunch with a busy executive. You're actually offering the executive something totally different. You're getting that knowledge. Yes, but you're publishing it on the internet for anyone that has access to the internet to learn from that wisdom. Yeah,
well, I think the other thing, I had a mission. I knew the power of a mission statement really early on. So people weren't agreeing to you know, to do it for me. Like they were doing it for the mission, which was to inspire, empower, and transform the industry, because this knowledge should be available to everybody, regardless of whether or not they have the money to go to culinary school or to go to hospitality school, or to, if they don't know the right person to get the job at that restaurant, you know, like we should share knowledge I believe openly and willingly. Like that should be our goal is to learn as much as possible and then pass it on to the next generation so they can take what we've got, as far as we've gone, and compound off that.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So for you, how many episodes were you at now? Yeah.
Recorded, I think you were episode 675.
675.
Yeah.
And before you got out to California, you published a solo episode.
Oh yeah.
I want to talk about the solo episode because I thought that was it was important for me as being someone as a podcast host. someone that loves podcasts, but also just indicative of, back to what we were talking about before, stamina, and really, this is what you've done. Now, what compelled you to publish that episode, and what was it about?
So it was basically a summary of the past year. I published it because, well, in full transparency, I was getting low on content, and I didn't want. I had an interview scheduled for the next day, but I was like, if this doesn't go through, like, I don't want to miss my air day. So I was like,
Lisa, you're good. Sorry, that's my manager. That
that's fine. So
turned around.
So
that's part of the fun of podcasting in the office.
It's casual.
Yeah.
So I wanted a cushion episode in case I was gonna air it regardless, but and honestly, like, something I've been wanting to do, like, after 650 episodes, being somebody who feels like I'm an imposter, like, at some point, like, bro, you've interviewed a shit ton of people. Like,
that's a lot of fucking people that you've interviewed.
Like, it's okay to share your opinions. Like,
sure.
You have an opinion now. You can form an opinion. You've done the work. Share your thoughts.
Well, there's themes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's themes that these restaurateurs and owners and chefs
exactly
that they've shared with you.
And I think the other thing is, like, it's extremely inefficient to travel all over the country and live out of your Honda Fit. Like, I stay in hotels and Airbnbs now, but for the first year, like, I was literally sleeping on floors, like, of listeners of the show, and, like, had, like, and just whatever it took to get there and get in front of people. I knew it was going to be short term, but back to the original question, like, why did I do the solo episode? Because I wanted to open up. I wanted to let people know, like all they hear is, with excitement, allowing me to introduce, like, and then that's another episode, and that's another, but they don't know that for the past year, like, I've been hustling my ass, or for the past 2 years, I basically said, like, this is what I do. Like, this is what my life has looked like. This is what I wanted to do. I feel like I failed in the sense that I was trying to scale the business and bring on other people who were strong where I was weak, being completely transparent about not being great with technology. I know that's holding me back. I know that I could be a lot further ahead if I was willing or had the desire to do that technical shit that I just can't stand doing. But you don't necessarily have to be the person to do it. Like, you can surround yourself with other people who are far greater at those things than you are. And that's what I was trying to do over the past year, was build a team around me. So I recruited people that were of high caliber, who were still great to this day, but, like, other opportunities came up and they had to take the better opportunities. No grudges. Like, I get it,
Sure.
But people, like, I don't mind. Anna wouldn't mind if I said this, but Anna Tazin of the Texas Restaurant Association, she was the VP of marketing and innovation. Like, that's her jam. The shit that I suck at is the shit that she loves. And I was like, you're the yin to my yang. I was like, we can take this thing so much further together. But she had a sure deal. She had a promotion. She had to lean into that opportunity, and she wouldn't have had the bandwidth for Restaurant Unstoppable. So I totally get it. And then living on the road isn't for everybody. So my editor and my filmographer was like, dude, I can't do what you do. He made it as far as Texas, and then after a week was like, I'm going back to New Hampshire. And I'm not mad at him either, because I get that I'm a freak. I get that I don't, like, not everybody can do what I do. Like, it's the ability to show up and to live, like, it's my baby. It's like, you would do anything for your baby, right? Like, mother would do anything for their baby. So it's not his baby. So I wouldn't expect him to go to the extremes I would go to. So there's no hard feelings there either. And he's still editing for me,
Yeah.
So I just felt like people needed to get behind the scenes, basically. They needed to connect with me on a deeper level. They need to know, like, this is what I was trying to do. And what I was trying to do was create courses. And we have a whole nother site, Unstoppable Courses. And we launched a course, and I felt like it flopped. And I also didn't like the idea of having to pitch it and sell it so hard, because that's just not inside of me. So it's just like, you don't know until you know, right? So you spend a year learning how to building a team, to learning how to launch a course, to investing in the assets you need to host the courses. And then you launch your course, and you're like, well, that didn't work. Oh, plus I totaled my car 2 weeks beforehand.
That's not good.
A week before leaving for a cross-country road trip. So, like, all this stuff was kind of compounding. And I just needed to, I think I just needed to have the conversation with myself, but I needed to do it out loud, So, like, that's kind of what the episode was. And plus I wanted to let them know, my listeners to know, like, the pivot and, like, what I learned from this experience and what I wanted to be going more into the future, kind of focusing on what I do best, which is hosting a restaurant podcast. And owning your niche. Like, it's good to diversify, but it doesn't have to happen tomorrow. I'm a big proponent of, or believer in, do one thing really well and let that one thing that you do attract onto yourself to the people who are better at other things, and then collaborate, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I am now. I just want to go deeper. I want to slow down. I want to be more present. I want to unpackage my thoughts after 650 episodes. Like, what do I believe to be true? And then use the podcast to get access to people that I wouldn't have had access to 6 years ago, because who's going to get, like, you know, now I have an asset. You got to use your assets to attract, to leverage, you know, your network and to build networks, right? So I can do that now. So I just need to be more intentional with the podcast, and lean into my curiosity. I think the other thing is you can only do so many types of the same interview over and over again before you're like, okay, I got to try something different.
Yeah.
You know, so that probably plays into it too.
Well, I think, you know, it's interesting. I shared with you just before we started that you had the founder of ZenReach on your podcast, and I was on LinkedIn, and I follow ZenReach because we use their Wi-Fi email marketing here at Cali. They sent an update, which I saw, and it was promoting your podcast, which is phenomenal.
Sandwiched between our interviews.
Which is, but I mean, it's phenomenal because it's different too. You know, it's because it's a tool that can help restaurants. And obviously with our podcast, Digital Hospitality, it's something that we meet as managers every week. It's something that I talk about every day, is the tools that we need to be successful in the next decade. What we've had to do as a restaurant for the last decade was literally embrace the internet, embrace digital, do everything we can because of where we're located in San Diego. And sharing that information now that we've done it through podcasts and through YouTube is something that is, for me, is very exciting. I guess.
Thank you, by the way, for sharing.
Oh no, absolutely.
I'm like, I've shared it yet.
I'm curious as to the relationship with the sponsors and especially the tech side of the restaurant space.
So I don't think I answered your original question of like we kind of got into sponsors a little, but one thing that I did early on to protect myself from selling out and to protect my listeners' best interest was to not take on a sponsor unless they've been mentioned first on the show, which made getting sponsors really hard, but I knew it would. But that was something that I could use as a marketing. Like, listen, like, I'm not going to put anybody in front of you. I'm not going to use these sponsors unless, like, I use that product myself, or if somebody else is like recommending it who's successful, right? So that's like one thing I did. Every once in a while, if it's a badass product and I've done the research and like, I'm like, well, who are your clients? And they like, well, here's our client list. And I recognize people who were on the show or our dream guests. I'm like, okay, like, you're legitimate. Like, I'll break my rule, but like, I don't do it lightly. You know, I take it very seriously. So I hate to say that my relationship is kind of transactional, but it is. And it's like the one thing.
I would disagree. I don't think it's transactional. I think it's less transactional, and it's more something that you're vetting them, even though you're not personally, like, we use ZenReach in our restaurant. And that's something that I told you. For us, it's important that we believe in whoever's sponsoring our show, because it's bigger than a sponsorship. I mean, you're making a commitment to tell the people that are taking the time to listen to you on your podcast or to watch you on YouTube that, hey, we're making this recommendation. I don't want to recommend. It's already hard enough to run a fucking business.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to recommend a shitty product that's going to make it harder to run your business.
And you got to be careful. I mean, you're only as good as your reputation. So if you start just pitching things to the highest bidder, or you start pitching the product of the highest bidder, you're not going to make a lot of friends that way, you know? But what I meant by transactional, like there's a sponsorship agreement where, like, if you sponsor the show, you're going to, get a 30-second pre-roll, a 60-second mid-roll, copy on the show notes page, and your image on the sponsors page or whatever. And like, that's it. And there's been times where like, oh, like, hey, like, would you be willing to do this? Or can we come on the show? I'm like, no. I'm like, this is the sponsorship agreement. Like, I'm not going to, like, I try to stay unbiased. I see my role as a host is as somebody who reports, like, I go out there and I get the information, I bring it back, and it's not up to me to decide what to do. It's up to my guest for you to act on my guest recommendations. Now, I can go through and curate all the recommendations and put that together, but it's still going to be unbiased. You know what I'm saying? And that's really important to me that I'm pretty open about being kind of against franchising and big corporations. I think you can use those models to grow to a certain point, but there's a certain point where it's just like, there's no way you can continue to do what you do as good as you do it once you reach a certain threshold of people, right? And we shouldn't sacrifice quality over quantity. It's just one of my values. Like, and that's something but at the same time, I still interview franchisees and franchisors or mostly franchisors, because I know we can learn a shit ton from them. And I might have those beliefs, but who's to say I'm right? You know? So like, I need to be open to their perspective. Like, maybe they can teach me something I didn't consider. You know what I'm saying?
So on your show, you end, is it a lightning round? What do you call it?
Speed round.
Speed round. So you end with the speed round. We're going to flip the speed round.
Okay.
And we're going to end it with you telling me, what are the 3 things that you've learned after interviewing all these restaurant owners?
Man.
The 3 most profound principles that have been imparted on you from people that give their lives to taking care of others in the hospitality space.
I mean, profound or like
or memorable.
Memorable. That's a loaded question.
That's how we like it.
You know, one of the things I say a lot on the show is that behind every great restaurant's a great person. So if you want to be a successful restaurant owner, the journey doesn't start with the restaurant. It starts with yourself. And that's probably been one of the biggest lessons, is that you're only, like, the other thing is, like, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, but you're not going to surround yourself with people who are better than you are, because like attracts like. So if you want to attract on yourself the best, you need to become the best, not necessarily the best at one thing, like a skill, but you need to be somebody who is good and like appreciates other people. So I guess the big thing is, one thing is, you're only as, you know, your restaurant will never be better than you. So if you want a great restaurant, become a great person. I think that's the lesson. And then you're only as good as the people you attract onto yourself. And if you think it's a one-man show, you got another thing coming. In today's world, with as competitive as the restaurant industry is, it takes an army. So you've got to attract onto yourself specialists and the people who are better at things that you are, and be willing to get out of the way, be willing to admit that you aren't the best, and to recognize when someone's better at you, so you can be better as a whole by letting them do their thing. Right. So is that 2 kind of?
That's good.
Is that 2 or?
What technology has been repeated the most by guests?
Ooh. What's being recommended the most right now as far as technology? Toast POS is probably the most recommended POS on the show, which gets recommended a lot. Jolt gets recommended a lot.
What's Jolt?
Well, actually, Jolt gets recommended. Jolt is basically like a checklist for the restaurant.
Oh, there's somebody over here that is obsessed with checklists.
Yeah, so it's basically, it takes the idea of using checklists.
Why didn't we create Jolt?
Right.
That was so stupid.
So
we should have made Jolt.
It's an app on a tablet that basically allows you to create checklists, and
you can't run any restaurant without a checklist.
Yeah, so it gives you software, so you can if you're at one restaurant but you want to check up on another restaurant, you can log into the checklist to see what's been accomplished.
Sure.
And the other thing is, sometimes certain checklists or certain items on the checklist you can't check until after you've taken a photo of it. So it's like ways to like force people to do the job. So it's like little stuff like that, and then you can monitor from a distance like what's getting done. So it's just a really great tool. It's a checklist on steroids. It's like $50 a month, but it's from what I've heard, if you use it well, it can be you get your return back tenfold.
So you're Professor Eric. What's the first book that you tell your hospitality class what to read?
First book, well, if we're going with the most recommended book on the show, it's Danny Meyer, Sitting at the Table. It's been called the Bible of the hospitality industry. I think a book that is more important, or if not just as important, more important, is the E-Myth, which is all about systems, processes, and procedures.
Malcolm Gladwell.
No. Michael Gerber.
Yeah, oh, that's right.
Yep.
E-Myth Revisited.
Yep. But Gladwell's another.
Yeah.
Every one of his books. From his newest book. Have you Talking to Strangers?
No.
That's a really cool one.
Really.
But I mean, so for like culture and like the restaurant industry, like a true glimpse into the restaurant industry, Sitting at the Table, for a book on systems, processes, and procedures, and how to systematize your business, the E-Myth, which stands for the entrepreneurial myth. And then for like hard on culture, I would say pick up Ari Weinswag's series of books. which is a lapsed anarchist's approach to fill in the blank with becoming a great leader, building a great business. And the books are written in like a essay form. So like you'll have like a 3-page like chapter that's independent from the rest of the book. So you can pick up the book from anywhere and like read like a 3-page, 4-page like essay. And like, yeah, I think that's probably good.
So as somebody with the #1 podcast, you obviously know who else is up on top of the charts. Who else do you think has a great restaurant podcast?
Restaurant podcasts. Man. We got to give our boy, Smart Pizza Marketing. Bruce Irving's doing a great job.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah.
I've already started following him on Facebook and
for
LinkedIn.
Marketing and that stuff. He's truly passionate about marketing. He stays super plugged in. I think he puts out great content. Keys to the Shop is another one that is worth looking into. And then there's so many out there. I'm afraid I'm going to piss somebody off by not mentioning their podcasts.
It's all right. Stover will follow.
Secret Sauce is another good one.
Follow up with a blog about it, about the restaurant podcast.
I feel like I gotta say them all.
No, you don't need to say them all. Well, how can people find you?
The podcast is probably most listened to on iTunes, but anywhere there's a podcast, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, any podcast player. If you search restaurant, usually the first or second result, so it's pretty easy to find. Sorry, I'm not trying to brag, but
no, that's a search engine result. That's what we talk about on Digital Hospitality.
So it's on all podcast platforms, or you can listen at restaurantunstoppable.com.
And what's your preferred social media platform?
I'm gonna say Instagram.
Instagram, and
and the handle is Eric Cacciatore, and that's EricCacciatore.
Perfect. Well, I'm grateful that you. First of all, I subscribed to your email newsletter, and then the same day you reached out and said that you were going to be traveling to California and making your way down to Southern California, and that we should meet up. And I responded back, and now here you are.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go and enjoy a Chargers Raiders watch party. And as you know, we built this restaurant, we built this bar to host big events, and we are a Chargers bar. It's going to be a crazy party. We're going to get some behind the scene footage with Blue Vision. These guys have been putting out incredible stuff for our YouTube channel, so make sure you guys subscribe to that, Cali BBQ Media, and check out Eric's podcast if you want to be unstoppable. Yeah. Thanks for coming, man.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
My name is Shawn Walchef. Thanks for watching Digital Hospitality. Be sure to subscribe. No, for real. Seriously, subscribe. And also check out our next video, like this one. This one right here. This. My producer told me here. Yeah, over here. This is where you're supposed to subscribe. This one.